Hey guys, it's Miss Moore White, and we are back with chapter 16. So we're just going to go and jump right in. It's going to be a two-part video, not too long, because there's only like 37 slides, and probably only like maybe 32 of those are going to be content. The other ones are going to be like kind of introductory or conclusion or include maps or things like that. So let's go on and get started. All right, so we have the chapter 16. Chapter 16 is all about alternating visions of the 19th century. So we're still looking at that same time period that we were looking at in chapter 15. But let me just go on. Oh, things are dropping. It's okay. So let's go to the beginning of chapter 16, which starts on page 600. And so we're, pretty much looking at that same time period of like 1850-ish, or the early, like the 1750 to 1850 range. So let's see what was happening around the world during this time period. So our global storylines that we're going to be focusing in on, protest movements challenged the 19th century order based on industrial capitalism, the nation state, and colonialism, or colonization, excuse me. All right. So what are these protests? They're not going to go willingly just to the abuses of capitalism or some of the abuses of the nation state or to the abuses of colonization as well. We're going to see protests are going to be led by prophets. You're going to see a lot more prophets kind of rise up during this time period. Political radicals, those who are completely opposite of what has previously happened. And also lots of common people, because the common people have, for the most part, always been at the bottom and have always lacked in power, but they're going to start to rally and unify together. And we'll see what that looks like in this history, or in this part of history. The movements arise among marginal groups and regions and express visions of ideal utopian futures. So we're trying to get away from the abuses of capitalism. We're trying to get away from the negative things that have happened with all of the revolutions during this time period. So these radical utopians, these ideal utopians, something that, like, a utopia is something that is like beautiful, it's amazing, it's stress-free, it's worry-free. You don't have to worry about like all of the negative ills that life has started to throw at people between 1750 and 1850. The movement differs markedly depending on distance from the centers of change. So how close you are to Europe and the Americas. So that's what it's going to look like. So the further you are away from these areas, that's how different your movements or your changes are going to be during this time period. And it's also going to reflect the local circumstances. So we're now kind of transitioning into this haves and have not world, where part of the world is industrialized and the other part is not. And also the part of the world that's not industrialized is oftentimes the being used for raw materials for the part of the world that is industrialized. So all right, and although most movements were defeated, they give voice to the views of peasants and workers and have a long-lasting effects on the policies of the ruling class. So once again, even though most of these movements are going to be defeated, the political class is going to be like, I got to listen to them, because if I don't, we're going to have continued uprisings. So we're going to see things kind of open up and spread out a little bit more across the world. All right, our core objectives, we only got, is it 3, 4? 4. I don't have my glasses on right now. They're somewhere around. I can't find them because I need my glasses to, see my glasses. It's okay. All right, we're going to describe the challenges to the ideas, the core objectives. We're going to describe the challenges to the ideals of industrial capitalism, colonialism, and nation states in this period. So what are some of the challenges, okay, that these 3 things really produce? So we're like, yes, money, but no to all of the other negative ramifications or issues that come along, including environmental toxins, including social issues, how it changes politics, so many different things. Same thing with colonialism. So we have one country that's making money and another one that's being used for their resources. And then next up, we're going to compare the utopian goals, the immediate outcomes, and long-term influences of rebel movements around the world. So how impactful were these defeated rebel movements? We're going to analyze the connection between 19th century protest movements and organized religion. So are there connections between those prophets who kind of rise up? And it's going to be kind of interesting too. So maybe like four or 500, or maybe even a little bit longer ago, about 1,000 years ago before this time period, if you had woken up and said, yo, I had a vision and God told me to tell you that I am the leader, people might have listened to you a bit more. But because we're kind of going into a society that's moving away from religion, some of these radical prophets are not necessarily going to be treated in the same way that other prophets were back in our times. And we're also going to assess the role that religion played in these alternative social visions. So that utopian idea, how is religion going to play a role in that? Because specifically, I know with Islam in the Wahhabinism, I think it's called. I think I might have mispronounced that, but we'll see it in a second. I'll just keep on moving. So our intro to this, we're going to see by the late 19th century, the US confined almost all American Indians to reservations. All right, that manifest destiny plan where we're moving westward. So we start off on the East Coast, the Atlantic coast, and they're moving westward. So as they move westward, we know that in like 1803, 1804, the US is going to purchase a land from France known as the Louisiana Purchase. So they're going to kind of like double in size overnight. But once they double in size, well, now you have more Native American interactions happening, and they're continuing to push those Native Americans west under the guise that, yo, we're going to leave you alone if you just move out west. But that's not true, because every time a new settler wants to come out west, they just continue to push Native Americans. And now they're going to be pushed into these reservations, which are oftentimes going to be bad land with zero resources and things like that. And it fails in comparison to what they had previously when they were dominant across the continent. All right, so one Paiute Indian named Wovoka had a vision in 1889 where the supreme being told him if they shunned white ways, especially alcohol, and performed the cleansing ghost dance, then Indians would be reborn to live in eternal happiness. All right, so the Red Man's Christ inspired new hope and drew people, including the Sioux, to make pilgrimages from hundreds of miles around Sitting Bull, the revered Sioux chief, who was killed in 1890. In 1890, the Sioux ghost dancers were massacred at the South Dakota Creek called Wounded Knee. So there are a lot of Indian massacres happening during this time period. So I'm going to touch on a lot of those different things. So one, the supreme being that the Paiute Indian was talking about, so Native Americans, even to this day, have higher alcoholism rates than anyone else in our country. And this is like Native Americans, Native people who are in the Aborigine people who are in Australia. Literally, you can go to any Native population group around the world that was colonized or lost their land or was victimized, and they all have higher rates of alcoholism and higher rates of drug use, and usually higher death rates than other parts of the nation or other comparable groups in the nation, even though they make up such a small population of each country that we're talking about. So that just shows you the lasting impacts of some of the harm and the viciousness that had happened to those Native American people that caused them to essentially kind of, run to alcohol and substances to kind of alleviate some of their pains. All right, and so once again, we have Indian tribes going to come together to basically try to unify, to rally together, to kind of get their voices heard. So some groups are going to adopt the European ways or those white ways, thinking that it's going to save them. It does not. Others are going to resist that, thinking it's going to save them as well, and it does not. But what we will see are plenty of massacres. Some of the massacres, I think at Wounding Knees, when you have like some massacre in which like 600, or maybe not that many people lose their lives, but you lose children, you lose women, and you lose men. So the children and the women had nothing to do with theoretically what was going on, but they got massacred because someone heard a gunshot. I don't know if the gunshot came from the American soldier side, or if it came from the Native American side. But after that gunshot was heard, the American soldiers just literally massacred all the people who were out there. Right. All right. So the movement's going to exemplify prophetic crusaders that challenged emerging 19th century order. So once again, these people who are going to rise up, these people who woke up one day and said, hey, God told me a vision on how things are supposed to be. Well, those prophetic people are going to lead some of these crusades to kind of save the land or save Native Americans during this time period. So this chapter is going to give voice to the visions of those who were opposed globally, who opposed global capitalism and European and North American colonialism. All right, so our reactions to social and political change. alternatives to emerging 19th century order varied considerably. Revitalization of traditional religions, strengthening of villages and communal bonds, and societies with no private property and equal shares of ownership goods. All right, so that is going to be an alternative to what we had seen in the previous chapter, where people were kind of moving away from religions. People were moving into cities and moving out of villages, and then also people were owning more and more things, and people had private property access. So descendants and their actions depended on their local traditions and the degree of contact with the effects of industrialized capitalism, European colonialism, and centralized nation states. So the places that we're going to talk about in this chapter, they're going to have different reactions to how these changes are happening, depending on how much they're being influenced by the capitalism, by colonialism, and also by that nation state building. And we'll talk more about that in a second. All right, prophecy and revitalization in the Islamic world and Africa. So in regions without direct colonial rule, alternative perspectives were strongest, far from main trade and cultural routes. All right, so in regions without direct colonial rule, so those regions that have not been impacted directly by European settlers, they're going to have alternative perspectives that are going to be, the people who have different perspectives are going to be those that are furthest away from their interactions with the Europeans. So probably those that are going to be more centralized inside of Africa are going to be pretty safe. And then also through this, we're going to see too the decline of the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughal empires, which is going to prompt religious revitalization movements. These are going to be led by prophets, and we're going to talk about one of those in depth coming up in the next slide. And they're going to seek to establish theocratic governments. So theocratic, that means that we are using the theocracy of religion to lead the people. So that means you're going to have your religion is first and your politics is going to be second. So there was unfortunately an issue where certain parts of Africa that was dominated by Islamic society felt like trade was coming in ahead of religion. So it was like money making and profit and politics was ahead of religion. We're going to see a flip of that during this time period. All right, so in non-Islamic Africa, where long distance trades and population growth were transforming social order, charismatic leaders gained power by resolving local environmental crises. So we'll talk about some of those local environmental crises in a little bit, but let's see just what all this looks like. Let's come on up for the Islamic revitalization. So we can see that the movements to revitalize Islam took place on the peripheries, in areas removed from trade networks and changes from global capitalism. So we're going to look to past traditions. So once again, those past things that were really beneficial and really helpful in kind of establishing some of these Islamic traditions and cultures. And they're going to attempt to establish new full-scale theocratic polities or political societies that were instruments of God's will and the vehicle to purifying Islamic culture. So boom, the first one, Wahhabism. One of the most powerful reformist movements came from the Najd region, and we're going to have a person named Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab. And he is going to basically he's going to attack some of these lax religious practices and demand a return to pure Islam. So once again, we see that commercialism has superseded the religion during this time period, or there's the belief that commercialism has superseded the religion at this time period. So there's going to be a push to get more aligned with Orthodox Islam than there is to kind of stay on the trajectory that that Islam has been on. So we're going to see, they're going to stress the oneness of Allah. And they're also going to criticize Sufi sects for extolling saints over worship of God. So, basically, Islam tries to get away from iconoclasm, or having an icon or a person that is superseding God. And so there's going to be a proliferation of more saints during this time period due to possibly the influences of all the trading happening with Islam in some parts of the Catholic world. So that kind of trading or that syncretism happening is going to lead to a return to orthodoxy. So we're going to see the Wahhabism is going to threaten Ottoman's hold on the Arabian Peninsula. So the Ottomans are going to be Sunni Islam, and we're going to see how that's going to kind of lead to some issues. So Wahhabism became militant, and the Ottomans pursued Egyptian troops to suppress the movement. So we see that we have a movement to return to orthodoxy, to return to change, to return back to how things were in the past, and that is going to be quashed by the military. So take notes. We had Native Americans who had these prophets who were, who were talking about how they can make changes, if they could, if they stop drinking alcohol and things like that. And then we go into Africa, and people are saying, if we turn back to Allah, if we get away from some of these radical things that have happened in our society, then we can kind of win. And that's also going to be crushed by the government. So we have American government who's killing off Native Americans, and then we have the Egyptian government in line with the Ottomans who are going to quash the Wahhabism movement that's going to rise up, or try to rise up. So while the Egyptians defeated the Saudis, Wahhabism continued to grow in the Muslim world. So you can kill a messenger, but you can't kill a message. And that's something that people have learned through society. You can kill a messenger, but you can't kill a message. In fact, when you kill the messenger, the message goes much further. All right, Islamic revitalization continued. So we have Usman Den Fodio and the Fulani. The Fulani are a really awesome tribe of people in West Africa. So the Muslim revolts are going to erupt in West Africa in response to increased trade with the outside world and circulation of religious ideas from across the Sahara. The Fulani are going to be cattle keepers who are both nomadic and sedentary. So they're going to have people who move around with their cattle, and those who are sedentary and kind of establish and maintain their lands. So the sedentary Fulani convert to Islam and sought to recreate a pure Islamic past. Sounds just like Wahhabism. Sounds like, some of the other things that we're going to talk about in this chapter. So there's a desire to return back to how things used to be, because this new way is corrupt. All right. So so Usman Den Fodio is going to create a vast Islamic empire in modern northern Nigeria. And he's going to encourage holy war, jihad against unbelievers. So there is no tolerance, there is no acceptance, because they're trying to get back to this pureness, so they can't allow people who are different to kind of proliferate their society and destroy what they have worked on. All right, so we're going to see that also the Fulani are going to support women being at the forefront, or actually involved and engaged. Fulani women are going to make critical contributions, I need my glasses, to success of religious revolts. Women are expected to support community, military, and religious endeavors. And we're going to see Dan Fodio's daughter, Nana Asau, was well known as an intellectual and as one who accompanied warriors in battle, nursing them, encouraging them, and hurling a spear towards the enemy. She was bad. I like it. I'm down with it. If I could have, been around during war times, I would have been launching a spear at someone as well. All right. And so they're also going to kind of create books about their military jihad and their quest to revitalize Islam throughout West Africa. All right. And so we're going to see that Usman Den Fodio is going to create an enduring and stable theocratic empire by 1809, the Sokoto Caliphate. And so once again, theocratic, religion is first, politics are second. So Allah is number one, and everything else comes second, where a lot of places it was politics and then Allah. Let's look at our map of 1601. So we can see the movements in the Middle East and the Mfecane movements in South Africa. So we can see once again the movements happening through this area. So we have like the Sudan Modest Estate that's going to be about lasting for about a little under 20 years. We're going to see that area that I was just talking about, the modern day Nigeria, or the Sokoto Caliphate, that's going to be formed in 1809. And we know that Nigeria is still around today. It's definitely had some imperialist quest where it was taken over by Great Britain, but they are independent as of today. And then if we drop on down, we'll talk about this area in a few slides. All right, so let's move into it. Political change in non-Islamic Africa. All right, so charismatic military men in non-Islamic Africa. So charismatic leaders are just a big part of our world's history. So like that charisma, something that draws you in. It's like when they're talking to you, they're like, yo, I don't know what they're saying, but I like it. Sounds like really, really awesome. And so, like, unfortunately, we're going to see a lot more charismatic leaders as we rise up through world history. One of the most famous charismatic leaders that I know of is going to be Hitler. All right, so we'll see. He's going to rise up. Before him, let's talk about what's going to happen in Africa. So non-Islamic men are going to also experience revolts. Our non-Islamic Africa are also going to experience revolts, new states, and prophetic movements. So just like in other places, we're still having revolts, we still have revolutions, we have new states developing, and we also have people who woke up one day and said, God told me to tell you that I am the leader and you better listen to me. So we'll see what happens in these areas. All right, so in response to the same combination of factors, long distance trade and population increased. So that the same things that are causing trade to increase in the other parts of Africa, or in the most Islamic parts of Africa, are causing it to rise in the non-Islamic parts. The same way that the population is rising in Europe, it's rising in America, in the Americas, it's happening literally around the world at the same time, okay? And that's all the trading that we're doing, all of that's gonna lead to population increasing. And then we're also looking for religious traditions and charismatic clan leaders. All right, so in the early 19th century, Southern Africa, political revolts called Mfecane reordered the political map. Not for long though, because yo, man, the white folks is coming. They finna take over South Africa. Here come the Boers. Here come, anyway, whatever. All right, so the Bantu-speaking people did not have political structures to cope with competition for land in South Africa. So the Bantu-speaking tribes did not have a political structure to cope with competition for land in Southern Africa. So they did not have a strong enough military, a strong enough political system, a strong enough anything to kind of provide provide the support they needed to really compete for land in Southern Africa. So then we're going to see, here comes the rise of the Zulu warriors. Shaka Zulu is going to be a completely ruthless warrior state. They're gonna drive other populations out of the regions. So I think I told you guys about how, like, you know, like the Mongols back in the day were like those kids who had silver teeth. So if you saw like 30 kids with silver teeth running at you, what you gonna do? Run. Same thing for the Zulu warriors. When you saw them coming at you, you just gave up. You were like, yo, bruh, I'm good. I personally don't even want to fight you. Here's my Apple Pencil. Here's some money. Here's all of my water. Whatever it is, you know, you're just gonna give those things up because you don't want to die, and you're probably gonna die anyway. All right, so it's going to force a shift from small clan communities to large centralized monarchies. So because people are so afraid of the Shakas, the Zulu warriors, people are going to basically kind of move away from those smaller, small scale communities and be forced to live into larger scale centralized monopolies. So the warriors are going to live and study and fight together, and that's going to really kind of solidify their bond and make them become stronger fighters and even more vicious. Shaka's adversaries are going to develop a similar kind of military state, like the Ndebele in Zimbabwe and the Soto of South Africa. And so just like with the Islamic empires in the Middle East, like the Mughals, the Ottomans, and the Safavids, they're going to fight against each other, but they're going to basically kind of be limited because their weapons are the same. All right. All right, so let's go on and move forward. Prophecy and rebellion in China. So now we're leaving Africa, we're going into China. And so by the mid 19th century, China is no longer isolated. China's not number one. China is losing. It's rapidly losing its dominance. And a lot of that's due to the drug trade that's happening with the opium wars. By rising population put increased pressure on land and resources. So we're looking at about 300 million people in China during this time period. That's a lot of people, the highest population in the world. So what is that going to look like in terms of their land, their resources, especially as their government is falling and not able to take care of the people as they had been previously. So rising opium consumption brought social instability and financial crisis. All the silver is leaving China and being used to buy opium. Okay. And then we're going to also see, because of the widespread drug use, it's causing social instability, especially in a place like China. China is really, really big on order, on hierarchy, on making sure things are done properly and effectively. And so to have that many people on drugs is really, really bad during this time period for China. So amidst the declining authority of the Qing dynasty, thousands of peasants joined the Taiping Rebellion. All right. Here comes the Taiping Rebellion, guys. All right, so the rebellion drew on China's tradition of peasant revolts rooted in religious sects such as the egalitarian or the millenarians. Women are going to play an important role, and they're going to be inspired by Taoist or by Buddhist sources. All right, so the Taiping Rebellion is a bit, where'd it go? All right, so the Taiping Rebellion is obviously eventually going to be like squashed down and fought back. I don't know how much they're going to put the Taiping Rebellion on your AP exam this year because it tends to kind of pop up a lot. So I won't go too far in depth, but just know that it was a movement done by the local peasants that eventually was quashed by the Chinese government. All right, so Hong Xiuquan. All right, so the dream of Hong Xiuquan, once again, people wake up, they have dreams and tell people that God told me to tell you something, and here it comes. All right, so he's going to be a founding prophet. All right, he's going to be a native of Guangdong, of southern China. He's going to first encounter Christian missionaries while preparing for the civil service examination in the 1830s. On failing the exam for the third time, he began to have visions. He was like, I failed once, twice, third time, I see it now. I'm a prophet. That's why I'm failing. All right. On the failing the fourth time, because 3 wasn't good enough, he reportedly understood the significance of his earlier visions through the Christian tract. So he's going to believe that the old father was the Lord Yihahua, of God, and Jesus was his older brother. So he's going to see the Christian story happening in China and through Chinese deities. So he's going to align or syncretize Christianity with what he feels is Chinese history as well. And so, like Jesus, Hong is going to believe that he had been sent to the world to save it from evil. All right, so unlike other sectarian leaders, Hong is going to begin preaching and converting publicly, destroying Confucius idols and shrines. So we're in Confucius area, Taoist area, that filial piety area, and Christianity, because it's a European or seen as a European religion, it's not going to be welcomed widely. So let's see what happens. So Hong's message of revitalization of a troubled world and restoration of a heavenly kingdom appealed to the subordinate class. So once again, those who have been left behind, those peasants, those who had been who are suffering, don't have food, don't have accommodations, don't have money, don't have whatever, they're going to turn more towards Hong. And so the Taiping Rebellion is going to herald a new era of economic and social justice. So Hong's first followers came from the margins of society, where anger was directed at the Qing Manchus instead of the Europeans. So people are going to see the Manchus as the issue and not the Europeans who are bringing in the drugs. So we'll see how this is going to evolve in a second. So after the social and economic problems caused by the Opium War, so we're seeing once again that the Qing are the issue, not the Europeans after the Opium War, which is mind-boggling because the Europeans are the ones who brought in drugs to their communities. All right, so the Manchus demons were obstacles to realizing God's kingdoms on earth. So because the Manchus were flawed, they were the problem in China, and they must be removed. And converts of Hong could not consume alcohol, opium, or indulge in any other like sensual pleasures. So they wanted a very pure, pristine life, and men and women are going to be segregated from administrative and residential purposes. And so what that means is they're going to intentionally keep men and women apart so that there is no, obviously, time for sensual pleasures or things like that. And also they can focus wholeheartedly on studying the Bible and being focused on Jesus. All right, so let's talk about the Taiping Rebellion. All right, so that Taiping Rebellion between 1851 and 1864. So lasted a long time. So essentially it's going to be like a civil war where you have like this radical group that's trying to make change in a very orthodox or a very set in stone place. Anyway, all right. So anyway, by 1850, Hong's going to have about 20,000 followers, and the Qing rulers are going to send troops to arrest Hong and other rebel leaders. But the Taiping forces repelled them and began to capture major cities. So in 1851, Hong declared himself the heavenly king of the Taiping kingdom. And by 1853, the Taiping rebels captured Nanjing and systematically killed Manchu men, women, and children. So this radical movement is going around and not just taking over, but also killing off people to ensure that they can maintain their dominance and their power. Several factors are going to contribute to the fall of the Taiping. So they're going to have struggles with leadership. Who's the leader? Is it Hong or is it somebody else or what's going on? They're going to have really excessively rigid codes of conduct. So once again, you can't drink, you can't indulge in opium, you can't have any kind of sexual contact. That's really, really difficult, I guess, for people to maintain and keep up with. And then the Han and Manchu elites rallied to the Qing dynasty side. So we're going to see, once again, that orthodox group, the Qing are the people who are, aligned with Confucianism, are going to rally together to push out the Taiping Rebellion, or this Christianized or European influence group. Western governments also supported the Qing and provided a mercenary army led by foreign officers to help suppress the rebellion. So not only is, so basically the outsiders like in Europe and stuff like that are going to be like, yo, this Taiping Rebellion is a risk to our profit. So if we want to continue profiting with our unequal treaties, we must maintain order. The easiest way to maintain order. Uh-oh. Dude, I don't want to restart my computer because I don't know if it's going to save. Oh, wow. It came back. Let me try to cut that part out of the video. All right, so let's see. Hey, my computer froze. We're just gonna jump back in this. It's okay. All right, so I think I stopped talking and saying that like the Western governments had money resting on the Qing keeping their ports open, and they couldn't allow for the Taiping Rebellion to mess with their money, so they sent in forces to squash it. So the Qing forces crushed the rebellion and killed Hong in 1864, the end of the Taiping Rebellion. About 20 million people had died in the Taiping Rebellion, a combination of mostly people who didn't support the Taiping Rebellion. So the Taiping Rebellion rebels are going to attempt to reorganize communities using language of prophetic revitalization, providing alternative vocabulary to political and spiritual legitimacy. So once again, they're having an alternative view of what the world looks like or what society looks like or even what religion looks like, even by taking on Christianity and making Christianity or seeing the connection between some of the leaders in China, which is an interesting kind of filial piety happening anyway, where they're putting the emphasis of like the country and religion on the Chinese creators. All right, so let's leave China. Let's go into Europe. And I'm probably going to do about 2 more slides for this video, just so we can get about halfway through. I think this might be the halfway point. We'll see. All right, so socialists and radicals in Europe. So we're leaving. So we've gone to America, we've gone to Africa, we've gone to China, and now we're going into Europe. Europe and North America's core areas of economic growth. So we're going to see, once again, the core growth is going to happen economically in North America and in Europe because of all of the the slavery, all of the, abuses happening, imperialism, industrialism, I mean, all that stuff happening. All right, so we're going to see challenges to main currents of thought and activities included radicals, liberals, utopian socialists, nationalists, abolitionists, and religious mavericks. So we're going to talk about all of those in a second. So restoration and resistance. So social and political unrest during the Restoration period between 1815 and 1848 stem from the ambiguous legacies of the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars. So what kind of, who's going to lead us? How are we going to be led? Is it going to be like democracy? Is it going to be a monarchy again? Is it going to be a military oligarch? Who's going to control all these different things? Like, what does that look like? So this restoration period, about 30 years or so, is really, really important for Europe. So the period is also going to be called the Age of Ideology because revolutionary upheavals forced everyone to justify their visions of social order. So it has to be kind of like rooted in, here is my thought down here. This is how I got to my idea of what we're going to do up here, because there's so many revolutionary upheavals that are happening. So you have to make sense of the people or they're going to revolt against you. So liberals are going to accept the French Revolution's overthrow of aristocratic privilege. So the aristocrats should not control everything. They're going to want to hold on to free trade and equality before law without price control and political violence. So that laissez-faire economy is okay. And they also want to not have political violence, like when they had the Bastille Day, or even when they had the Reign of Terror, it happened afterwards. And they also want to have more free trade and equality before the law. So all of these things are the wants that are happening in France right now. So the radicals believe that the French Revolution had not gone far enough. So they wanted to hold on to free trade, equality before law without price control, and political violence. I think that was a typo. I think that was a typo. Shouldn't write that twice. It's okay though. We're gonna move on. All right, so the last one that I'm gonna focus in on for right now, I think we have like 37 slides. So I'm at like slide number 17 right now. So we'll have about 20 more when we come back together. So that's the radical vision. So radical envision totally reconfigurations of the old regime systems, state systems, continuing the revolution. Radicals threat to the return of revolution ultimately reconcile liberals and reactionaries to preserve stat quo. So because these radicals are going to be so far to the left, it's actually going to rally and unify the people who are liberal and who are reactionary, who want change, but just not as much radical change. So we're going to see this nationalist concept I've been talking about previously. Here comes. So nationalism, this idea important to liberals and radicals, but threaten conservatives. So the idea of popular sovereignty spread with the people, generally defined as those who shared a common language, culture, and history. That's your nation right there. Boom. Culture, language, history. So that means that people, which people counted and who decided caused conflict among nationalists. So who, in France, they had like other regional languages. In certain parts of France, it's close to Germany, where they speak German more prevalent there than they do in France. So who is actually going to be accepted and rejected with these new classifications? Each nationalistic movement drew backers from liberal aristocracy and the well-educated and the commercially active middle classes. Most nationalists, so basically people who had power, wanted to see the rise of nations, usually because they had things to benefit from this. And most nationalistic movements initially started off as weak, like the Polish uprising, but eventually leaders are going to pursue education and cultural programs that are going to help to unite the nation. So they're going to be weak because what is our common culture and language and all that stuff? But when we have a common, now we have emphasis on education and literacy and things like that, it's easier to kind of enforce that. And then also what you put in those books matters. So I can tell you things in the books that may not necessarily always be true, but they're going to get this like fight in you, like, oh my God, I feel so French right now. Ooh, ah, oui, oui, yes. Yes. All right. And so another place is Greece is going to secure their independence from the Ottoman Empire in 1831. They're still going to be a pain in the Ottoman side all the way until the Ottomans crumble in 1918. And they're going to be inspired by religious revivalism and Enlightenment ideas as well. So Greek is known as an Orthodox Christian place. So they're going to be inspired by Orthodox Christianity or that original Christianity. And most nationalistic movements were suppressed or slowed slowed down with little bloodshed in the first half of the century, but not in the 20th century. All right, so we'll see how these radical conditions and change all these things over time. All right, that's it for right now. When we come back, we'll do the next part. And that's essentially it. I hope you guys are having an awesome day. See you soon. Bye.